Um, what's this? Oh, sorry. Looking forward to reading time with you. I've got the wrong glasses on, but I got my reading glasses on. When I go to bed, I replay the videos to fall asleep. Oh, isn't that sweet? Isn't that awesome? So we'll just wait for folks to come in for a bit. I have my little light and fan here. It's plugged into my little battery thing, and I got my phone plugged in. Yeah, it's behind my neck, but I got my fan just in case. So we are almost done this book, folks. We're almost done. There is one, two, three chapters left. So we should be, I think we're just about done racing for the day too. But I have my little light on here so I can see. Um, Hopefully we won't be interrupted by too many cars. Hi, everybody coming in. Hi, hi, hi. How's it going? Hey, Sue. We're on our last three chapters of Little Women, and then we're going to start into Little Men. But we're going to start in a minute. The only thing is my drink is holding up my fan. But it works. So, because it's a stainless steel thing. So here we go. Hey, Barefoot Chickens, Tina, Weed Bee, Suprov, and a bunch of people who aren't saying hi. All right. Chapter 45, Daisy and Demi. I cannot feel that I have done my duty as a humble historian of the March family without devoting at least one chapter to the two most precious and important members of it. Daisy and Demi had now arrived at years of discretion. For in this fast age, babies of 3 or 4 assert their rights and get them too, which is more than many of their elders do. If there ever were a pair of twins in danger of being utterly spoiled by adoration, it was these prattling Brooks. Of course, they were the most remarkable children ever born, kind of like my grandson. As will be shown when I mention that they walked at 8 months. Wow. Apparently I walked at 9. They walked at 8 months, talked fluently at 12 months, and at 2 years took their places at the table and behaved with a propriety which charmed all beholders. At 3, Daisy demanded a needler and actually made a bag with 4 stitches in it. She likewise set up housekeeping in the sideboard and managed a microscopic cooking stove with a skill that brought tears of pride to Hannah's eyes. While Demi learned his letters with his grandfather, who invented a new mode of teaching the alphabet by forming the letters with his arms and legs, thus uniting gymnastics for head and heels. The boy early developed a mechanical genius which delighted his father and distracted his mother, for he tried to imitate every machine he saw, and kept the nursery in a chaotic condition with his sewing machine, a mysterious structure of string, chairs, clothespins, and spools for wheels to go wound and wound. Also a basket hung over the back of a big chair in which he vainly tried to hoist his confiding sister, who, with feminine devotion, allowed her little head to be bumped till rescued, when the young inventor indignantly remarked, "Why, Marmar, that's... Why, Marmar, that's my lily waiter, and me's trying to pull her up." I think he meant dumb waiter. Oh, elevator, right. Though utterly unlike in character, the twins got on remarkably well, and that's probably why they got along well, because they were unlike in character. And seldom quarreled more than 3 times a day. Oh, me and my brother Bob. Oh my God, we were horrible when we were kids. Of course, Demi tyrannized over Daisy and gallantly defended her from every other aggressor, while Daisy made a galley slave of herself and adored her brother as the one perfect being in the world. Our oldest walked at about 9.5, 10 months. Yeah. They say you can't, they'll walk when they can balance their head. Arthur was almost, he was a little over a year. Um, a rosy, chubby, sunshiny little soul was Daisy, who found her way into everybody's heart and nestled there. One of the captivating children who seemed made to be kissed and cuddled, adorned and adored like little goddesses, and produced for general approval on all festive occasions. Her small virtues were so sweet that she would have been quite angelic if a few small naughtinesses had not been kept her delightfully human. It was all fair weather in her world, and every morning she scrambled up to the window in her little nightgown to look out and say, no matter whether it rained or shone, "Oh, pity day, oh, pity day." Everybody was a friend, and she offered kisses to a stranger so confidingly that the most inveterate bachelor relented, and baby lovers became faithful worshippers. "Me loves everybody," she once said, opening her arms with her spoon in one hand and her mug in the other, as if eager to embrace and nourish the world. As she grew, her mother began to feel that the dovecote would be blessed by the presence of an intimate as serene and as loving as that which had helped to make the old house home, and to pray that she might be spared a loss, that which had lately taught them how long they had entertained an angel unawares. Her grandfather also called her Beth, and her grandmother watched over her with untiring devotion, as if trying to atone for some past mistake, which no eye but her own could see. Demi, like a true Yankee, was of an inquiring turn, wanting to know everything and often getting much disturbed because he could not get satisfactory answers to his perpetual "what for?" He also possessed a philosophical bent, to the great delight of his grandfather, who used to hold Socratic conversations with him, in which the precocious pupil occasionally posed as teacher, to the undisguised satisfaction of the womenfolk. "What makes my legs go, Dwampa?" asked the young philosopher, surveying those active portions of his frame with a meditative air while resting after a go-to-bed frolic one night. "It's your little mind, Demi," replied the sage, stroking the yellow head respectfully. "What is a little mind?" "It's something which makes your body move, as the spring made the wheels go in my watch when I showed it to you." "Open me! I want to see it go wound." "I can't do that any more than you could open the watch. God winds you up, and you go till he stops you." "Does I?" And Demi's eyes grew big and bright as he took in this new thought. "Is I wound it up like the watch?" "Yes, but I can't show you how, for it is done when we don't see." Demi felt of his back as if expecting to find, like that of the watch, and then gravely remarked, "I guess Dodd does it when I'm asleep." A careful explanation followed, to which he listened so attentively that his anxious grandmother said, "My dear, do you think it's wise to talk about such things to that baby? He's getting great bumps over his eyes and learning to ask most unanswerable questions." "If he's old enough to ask the questions, he's old enough to receive true answers." Smart grandfather. "I'm not putting the thoughts into his head, but helping him unfold those already there. These children are wiser than we are, and I have no doubt the boy understands every word I've said to him. Now, Demi, tell me where you keep your mind." If the boy had replied like Alcibiades, "By the gods, Socrates, I cannot tell," his grandfather would not have been surprised. But when after standing a moment on one leg like a meditative young stork, he answered in a calm tone of conviction, "In my little belly." The old gentleman could only join in Grandma's laugh and dismiss the class in metaphysics. There might have been cause for maternal anxiety if Demi had not given convincing proofs that he was a true boy, as well as a budding philosopher. For often, after a discussion which caused Hannah to prophesy with ominous nods, "That child ain't long for this world," he would turn about and set her fears at rest by some of the pranks with which dear, dirty, naughty little rascals distract and delight their parents' souls. In other words, he isn't too perfect. Meg made many moral rules and tried to keep them, but what mother is ever proof against the winning wiles and ingenious evasions, or the tranquil audacity of the miniature men and women who so early show themselves accomplished artful dodgers? That's from The Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist. "No more raisins, Demi. They'll make you sick," says Mama to the young person who offers his services in the kitchen with unfailing regularity on plum pudding day. "Me likes to be sick." I don't want to have you, so run away and help Daisy make patty cakes." He reluctantly departs, but his wrongs weigh upon his spirit, and by, when an opportunity comes to readdress them, he outwits Mama by a shrewd bargain. "Now you have been good children, and I'll play anything you like," says Meg, as she leads her assistant cooks upstairs when the pudding is safely bouncing in the pot. "Truly, Mama?" asked Demi with a brilliant idea in his well-powdered head. "Yes, Trudy, anything you say," replies the short-sighted parent, preparing herself to sing The Three Little Kittens a half a dozen times over and over, or to take her family to Buy a Penny Bun, regardless of wind or limb. But Demi corners her by the cool reply, "Then we'll go and eat up all the raisins." Aunt Dodo, which would be Jo, was chief playmate and confidant of both children, and the trio turned the little house topsy-turvy. Aunt Amy was as yet only a name to them. Aunt Beth soon faded into a pleasantly vague memory, but Aunt Dodo was a living reality, and they made the most of her, for which compliment she was deeply grateful. But when Mr. Bear came, Jo neglected her playfellows, and dismay and desolation fell upon their little souls. Daisy, who was fond of going about peddling kisses, lost her best customer and became bankrupt. Demi, with the infantile penetration, soon discovered that Dodo liked to play with the bear man better than she did with him. But though hurt, he concealed his anguish, for he hadn't the heart to insult a rival who kept a mine of chocolate drops in his waistcoat pocket, and a watch that could be taken out of its case and freely shaken by ardent admirers. Some persons might have considered these pleasing liberties as bribes, but Demi didn't see it in that light, and continued to patronize the bear man with pensive affability, while Daisy bestowed her small affections upon him at the third call, and considered his shoulder her throne, his arm her refuge, and his gifts of treasure surpassing worth. Gentlemen are sometimes seized with sudden fits of admiration for the young relatives of ladies whom they honor with their regard. But this counterfeit... Okay, you're going to have to forgive me here for a second. Philoprogenitiveness. Okay. Philoprogenitiveness sits uneasily upon them and does not deceive anybody a particle. Mr. Bear's devotion was sincere, however likewise effective, for honesty is the best policy in love as in law, and he was one of the men who are at home with children and look particularly well when little faces made a pleasant contrast with his manly one. His business, whatever it was, detained him from day to day, but evenings seldom failed to bring him out to see, well, he always asked for Mr. March, so I suppose he was the attraction. The excellent papa labored under the delusion that he was and in long discussions with the kindred spirit, till a chance remark of his more observant grandson suddenly enlightened him. Mr. Bear came in one evening to pause on the threshold of the study, astonished by the spectacle that met his eye. Prone upon the floor lay Mr. March, with his respectable legs in the air. Beside him, likewise prone, was Demi, trying to imitate the attitude with his own short, scarlet stocking legs. Both grovelers so seriously absorbed that they were unconscious of spectators, till Mr. Bear laughed his sonorous laugh, and Joe cried out with a scandalized face, Father, Father, here's the professor. Granddad was teaching him the alphabet. V. Down went the black legs and up came the gray beard as the preceptor said with undisturbed dignity, Good evening, Mr. Bear. Excuse me for a moment, we are just finishing our lesson. Now, Demi, make the letter and tell me its name. I know there a few convulsive efforts. The red legs took the shape of a pair of compasses, and the intelligent pupil triumphantly shouted, It's a we, Grandpa, it's a we. A V. He's a born weller, laughed Joe as her parent gathered himself up, and her nephew tried to stand on his head as the only mode of expressing his satisfaction that school was over. What have you been at today, Boopshkin? Mr. Bear asked, picking up the gymnast. Me went to see little Mary. And what did you do there? I kissed her, began Demi with artless frankness. Prut, thou beginnest early. What did the little Mary say to that? Asked Mr. Bear, continuing to confess the young sinner who stood upon his knee exploring the waistcoat pocket. Oh, she liked it, and she kissed me, and I liked it. Don't little boys like little girls? Asked Demi with his mouth full and an air of bland satisfaction. You precocious chick. Who put that thought into your head? Said Joe, enjoying the innocent revelations as much as the professor. 'Tisn't in my head, it's in my mouth, answered literal Demi, putting out his tongue with a chocolate drop on it, thinking she alluded to confectionery, not ideas. Thou shouldst save some for thy little friend, sweets to the sweet manling. And Mr. Bear offered Joe some with a look that made her wonder if chocolate was not the nectar drunk by the gods. Demi also saw the smile, which was impressed by it, and artlessly inquired, Do great boys like great girls too, Fessor? Like young Washington, Mr. Bear could not tell a lie, so he gave the somewhat vague reply that he believed they did sometimes, in a tone that made Mr. March put down his clothes brush, glance at Joe's retiring face, and then sink into his chair, looking as if the precious chick had put an idea into his head that was both sweet and sour. Why, Dodo, when she caught him in the china closet half an hour afterwards, nearly squeezed the breath out of his little body with a tender embrace, instead of shaking him for being there. Why, she followed up this novel performance with an unexpected gift of a big slice of bread and jelly, remained one of the problems over which Demi puzzled his small wits and was forced to leave unsolved forever. Because got Dad and Joe thinking, and Professor, that, oh, and that's it. Demi puzzled his small wits and was forced to leave unsolved forever. Thank you, folks. Should we do another one? Do you want to do another one? Let me know if you want me to read the next one. Hi, Sue. What do you mean looks like a troll? Who's a troll? What gloves do you leave at home? Obviously you. Who is Sam Gloves? Reschedule in September. Is that for your thing, honey? How did that go? All right. I thought as soon as you said that about the Artful Dodger. Okay. Chapter 46. And I believe we have one more after this, but we're not going to finish it tonight. Under the Umbrella. While Laurie and Amy were taking conjugal strolls over velvet carpets, as they set their house in order and planned a blissful future, Mr. Bear and Joe were enjoying promenades of a different sort, along muddy roads and sodden fields. I always do take a walk towards evening, and I don't know why I should give it up just because I often happen to meet the professor on his way out, said Joe to herself after 2 or 3 encounters, for though there were 2 paths to Meg's, whichever one she took, she was sure to meet him, either going or returning. He was always walking rapidly and never seemed to see her till quite close, when he would look as if his short-sighted eyes had failed to recognize the approaching lady till that moment. Then, if she was going to Meg's, he always had something for the babies. If her face was turned homeward, he had merely strolled down to see the river, and was just about returning unless they were tired of his frequent calls. Under the circumstances, what could Joe do but greet him civilly and invite him in? If she was tired of his visits, she concealed her weariness with perfect skill, and took care that there should be coffee or supper, as Mr. Bear, doesn't like tea. By the second week, everyone knew perfectly well what was going on, yet everyone tried to look as if they were stone blind to the changes in Joe's face. They never asked why she sang about her work, did her hair 3 times a day, got so blooming with her evening exercise that no one seemed to have the slightest suspicion that Professor Bear, while talking philosophically with her father, was giving the daughter lessons in love. Joe couldn't even lose her heart in a decorous manner, but sternly tried to quench her feelings, and failing to do so, led a somewhat agitated life. She was more mortally afraid of being laughed at for surrendering after her many and vehement declarations of independence. Laurie was her especial dread, but thanks to the new manager, he behaved with praiseworthy propriety, even called Mr. Bear a capital old fellow in public, never alluded in the remotest manner to Joe's improved appearance, or expressed the least surprise at seeing Professor's hat on the March's hall table nearly every evening. But he exulted in private and longed for the time to come when he could give Joe a piece of plate with a bear and a ragged staff on it as an appropriate coat of arms. For a fortnight, the professor came and went with lover-like regularity. Then he stayed away for 3 whole days and made no sign, a proceeding which caused everybody to look sober, and Joe became pensive at first, and then, alas for romance, very cross. Disgusted, I dare say, and gone home as suddenly as he came. It's nothing to me, of course, but I should think he would have come and bid us goodbye like a gentleman, she said to herself, with a despairing look at the gate. She put on her things for the customary walk, and one dull afternoon. You'd better take the little umbrella, dear, for it looks like rain, said her mother, observing that she had on her new bonnet, but not alluding to the fact. Yes, Marmee. Do you want anything in town? I've got to run in and get some paper, returned Joe, pulling out the bow under her chin before the glass as an excuse for not looking at her mother. Yes, I want some twilled silesia, a paper of number 9 needles, and 2 yards of narrow lavender ribbon. Have you got your thick boots on and something warm under your cloak? I believe so, said Joe absently. If you happen to meet Mr. Bear, bring him home to tea. I quite long to see the dear man, added Mrs. March. Joe heard that, but made no answer except to kiss her mother and walk rapidly away, thinking with a glow of gratitude in spite of her heartache. How good she is to me. What do girls do who haven't any mothers to help them through their troubles? The dry goods stores were not down among the counting houses, banks, and wholesale warehouses, where the gentlemen congregate. But Jo found herself in that part of the city before she did a single errand, loitering along as if waiting for someone, examining engineering instruments in one window and examples of wool in another with a most unfeminine interest. Tumbling over barrels, being half smothered by descending bales, and hustled unceremoniously by busy men who looked as if they wondered how the deuce she got there. A drop of rain on her cheek recalled her thoughts from baffled hopes to ruined ribbons, for the drops continued to fall, and being a woman as well as a lover, she felt that though it was too late to save her heart, she might save her bonnet. Now she remembered the little umbrella, which she had forgotten to take in her hurry to be off. But regret was unavailing, and nothing could be done but borrow one or submit to a drenching. She looked up at the lowering sky, down at the crimson bow already flecked with black at a certain grimy warehouse with Hoffman and Schwartz and Company over the door, and said to herself with a sternly reproachful air, "Serves me right. What business had I to put on my best things to come philandering down here, hoping to see the professor? Jo, I'm ashamed of you. No, you shall not go there to borrow an umbrella, or find out where he is from his friends. You shall trudge away and do your errands in the rain, and if you catch your death and ruin your bonnet, it's no more than you deserve. Now then." With that, she rustled across the street so impetuously that she narrowly escaped annihilation from a passing truck, and precipitated herself into the arms of a stately old gentleman who said, "I beg your pardon, ma'am," and looked mortally offended. Somewhat daunted, Jo righted herself, spread her handkerchief over the devoted ribbons, and put temptation behind her, hurried on with increasing dampness around the ankles, and much clashing of umbrellas overhead. The fact that a somewhat dilapidated blue one remained stationary above the unprotected bonnet attracted her attention, and looking up, saw Mr. Bear looking down. "I feel to know the strong-minded lady who goes bravely under many horse noses and so fast through much mud. What do you down here, my friend?" "I'm shopping." Mr. Bear smiled as he glanced from the pickle factory on one side to the wholesale hide and leather concern on the other, but only said politely, "You have no umbrella." "May I go also and take care of the bundles?" "Yes, thank you." Jo's cheeks were as red as her ribbon, and she wondered what he thought of her, but she didn't care, for in a minute she found herself walking arm in arm with the professor, feeling as if the sun had suddenly burst out with uncommon brilliancy, that the world was all right again, and that one thoroughly happy woman was paddling through the wet that day. "We thought you had gone," said Jo hastily, for she knew he was looking at her. Her bonnet wasn't big enough to hide her face, and she feared he might think the joy betrayed unmaidenly. "Did you believe that I should go with no farewell to those who have been so heavenly kind to me?" he asked so reproachfully that she felt as if she had insulted him by the suggestion, and answered heartily, "No, I didn't. I knew you were busy about your own affairs, but we rather missed you, father and mother especially." "And you?" "I'm always glad to see you, sir." In her anxiety to keep her voice calm, Jo made it rather cool, and the frosty little monosyllable at the end seemed to chill the professor, for his smile vanished as he said gravely, "I thank you, and come one time more before I go." "You are going, then?" "I have no longer any business here. It is done." "Successfully, I hope?" said Jo, for the bitterness of disappointment was in that short reply of his. "I ought to think so, for I have a way for I have a way open to me by which I can make my bread and give my junglings much help, youngsters. Tell me, please. I'd like to know all about the boys, said Joe eagerly. That is so kind. I'll gladly tell you. My friends find for me a place in a college where I teach as at home and earn enough to make the way smooth for France and Emile. For this I should be grateful, should I not? Indeed you should. How splendid it will be to have you doing what you like and able to see you often, and the boys, cried Joe, clinging to the lads as an excuse for the satisfaction she could not help betraying. Ah, but we shall not meet often, I fear. This place is in the west. So far away? And Joe left her skirts to their fate as if it didn't matter now what became of her clothes or herself. Mr. Bear could read several languages, but he had not learned to read women yet. He flattered himself that he knew Joe pretty well, and was therefore much amazed by the contradictions of voice, face, and manner which she showed him in rapid succession that day, for she was in half a dozen different moods in the course of half an hour. And when she met him, she looked surprised, though it was impossible to keep suspecting that she had come for that express purpose. When he offered her his arm, and she took it with a look that filled him with delight, but when he asked if she missed him, she gave such a chilly, formal reply that despair fell on him. On learning his good fortune, she almost clapped her hands. Was the joy all for the boys? Then, on hearing his destination, she said, so far away, in a tone of despair that lifted him out of a pinnacle of hope, onto a pinnacle of hope. But the next minute she tumbled him down again by observing, like one entirely absorbed in the matter, here's the place for my errands. Will you come in? It won't take long. For Joe rather prided herself upon her shopping capabilities, and particularly wished to impress her escort with the neatness and dispatch of which she would accomplish the business. But owing to the flutter she was in, everything went amiss. She upset the tray of needles, forgot the celestia to be twilled till it was cut off, gave the wrong change, and covered herself with confusion by asking for lavender ribbon at the calico counter. But Mr. Bear stood by, watching her blush and blunder, and as he watched, his own bewilderment seemed to subside, for he was beginning to see that on some occasions women, like dreams, go by contraries. When they came out, he put the parcel under his arm with a more cheerful aspect and splashed through the puddles as if he rather enjoyed it on the whole. Should we not do a little what you call shopping for the babies and have a farewell feast tonight if I go for my last call at your so pleasant home? He asked, stopping before a window full of fruit and flowers. What shall we buy? What will we buy? Said Joe, ignoring the latter part of the speech, and sniffing the mingled odors with an affectation of delight as they went in. May we have oranges and figs? Asked Mr. Bear with a paternal air. They eat them when they can get them. May they have oranges and figs? They eat them when they can get them. Do you care for nuts? Like a squirrel. Hamburg grapes? Yes. We shall surely drink to the fatherland in those. Joe frowned upon that piece of extravagance and asked why he didn't buy a frail of dates or a cask of raisins and a big bag of almonds and be done with it. Whereat Mr. Bear confiscated her purse, produced his own, and finished the marketing by buying several pounds of grapes, a pot of rosy daisies, and a pretty jar of honey to be regarded in the light of a demijohn. Then distorting his pockets with knobby bundles and giving her the flowers to hold, he put up the old umbrella and they traveled on again. Miss March, I have a great favor to ask you, began the professor after a moist promenade of half a block. Whoops. Excuse me. I'm starting to sweat. I think our air conditioner needs recharging. Honey, are you just about done with the air conditioner? Okay. Miss March, I have a great favor to ask you, began the professor after a moist promenade of half a block. Yes, sir. Joe's heart began to beat so hard she was afraid he would hear it. I am bold to say it in spite of the rain, because so short a time remains to me. Yes, sir. And Joe nearly crushed the small flower pot with the sudden squeeze he gave it. I wish to get a little dress for my Tina, and I'm too stupid to go alone. Will you kindly give me a word of taste and help? Yes, sir. And Joe felt as calm and cool all of a sudden as if she had stepped into a refrigerator. Perhaps also a shawl for Tina's mother. She is so poor and sick, and the husband is such a care. Yes, yes, a thick, warm shawl would be a friendly thing to take to the little mother. I'll do it with pleasure, Mr. Bear. I'm going very fast. Getting dearer every minute. What? Huh? Great. I'm going very fast, and he's getting dearer every minute, added Joe to herself. Then, with a mental shake, she entered into the business with an energy which was pleasant to behold. Mr. Bear left it all to her, so she chose a pretty gown for Tina, and then ordered out the shawls. The clerk, being a married man, condescended to take an interest in the couple, who appeared to be shopping for their family. Your lady might prefer this. It is a superior article. A most desirable color, quite chaste and genteel, he said, shaking out a comfortable gray shawl and throwing it over Joe's shoulders. Does this suit you, Mr. Bear? She asked, turning her back to him and feeling deeply grateful for the chance of hiding her face. Excellently well. We will half it, answered the professor, smiling to himself as he paid for it, while Joe continued to rummage the counters like a confirmed bargain hunter. Now shall we go home? He asked, as if the words were very pleasant to him. Yes, it's late, and I'm so tired. Joe's voice was more pathetic than she knew, for now the sun seemed to have gone in as suddenly as it came out. The world grew muddy and miserable again, and for the first time her heart was colder than the former, fuller of pain than the latter. Mr. Bear was going away. He only cared for her as a friend. It was all a mistake, and the sooner it was over, the better. With this idea in her head, she hailed an approaching omnibus with such a hasty gesture that the daisies flew out of the pot and were badly damaged. This is not our omnibus, said the professor, waving the loaded vehicle away and stopping to pick up the poor little flowers. I beg your pardon, I didn't see the name distinctly. Never mind, I can walk. I'm used to plodding in the mud, returned Joe, winking hard because she would have died rather than openly wipe her tears. Mr. Bear saw the drops on her cheeks, and though she turned her head away, the sight seemed to touch him very much, for suddenly, stooping down, he asked in a tone that meant a great deal, Heart's dearest, why do you cry? Now, if Joe had not been new to this sort of thing, she would have said she wasn't crying, had a cold in her head, or told any other feminine fib proper to the occasion, instead of which that undignified creature answered with an irrepressible sob, Because you're going away. Oh, mein Gott, that is so good, cried Mr. Bear, managing to clasp his hands in spite of the umbrella and the bundles. Joe, I have nothing but much love to give you. I came to see if you could care for it, and I waited to be sure that I was something more than a friend. Am I? Can you make a little place in your heart for old Fritz? He added all in one breath. Oh, yes, said Joe, and he was quite satisfied, for she folded both hands over his arm and looked up at him with an expression that plainly showed how happy she would be to walk through life beside him, even though She had no better shelter than the old umbrella if he carried it. It was certainly proposing under difficulties, for even if he had desired to do so, Mr. Bear could not go down upon his knees on account of the mud. Neither could he offer his hand, except figuratively, for both were full. Much less could he indulge in tender demonstrations in the open street, though he was near to it. So the only way in which he could express his rapture was to look at her with an expression which glorified his face to such a degree that there actually seemed to be little rainbows in the drops that sparkled on his beard. If he had not loved Jo so very much, I don't think he could have done it then, for she looked far from lovely, with her skirts in a deplorable state, her rubber boots splashed to the ankle, and her bonnet a ruin. Fortunately, Mr. Bear considered her the most beautiful woman living, and she found him more Jove-like than ever, though his hat brim was quite limp, and the little rills trickling thence upon his shoulders, for he had held the umbrella over Jo, and every finger of his gloves needed mending. Passers-by probably thought them a pair of harmless lunatics, for they entirely forgot to hail a bus, and strolled leisurely along, oblivious to the deepening dusk and fog. Little they cared what anybody thought, for they were enjoying the happy hour that seldom comes but once in a life, the magical moment which bestows youth on the old and beauty on the plain, wealth on the poor, and gives human hearts a foretaste of heaven. The professor looked as if he had conquered a kingdom, and the world had nothing more to offer him in the way of bliss, while Jo trudged beside him, feeling as if her place had always been there, and wondering how she ever could have chosen any other lot. Of course she was the first to speak intelligibly. I mean, for the emotional remarks which followed her impetuous, "Oh yes," were not coherent or reportable character. "Friedrich, why didn't you—" "Oh, heaven, she gives me the name that no one speaks since Mina died," cried the professor, pausing in a puddle to regard her with a grateful delight. She called him Friedrich instead of Fritz. "I always call you that to myself. I forgot. I won't unless you like it." "Like it? It is more sweet to me than I can tell. Say thou also, and I shall say your language in almost as beautiful as mine." "Isn't thou a little sentimental?" asked Jo, privately thinking it a lovely monosyllable. "Sentimental? Yes, thank God. We Germans believe in sentiment and keep ourselves young with it. Your English you is so cold. Say thou, heart's dearest. It means so much to me," pleaded Mr. Bear, more like a romantic student than a grave professor. "Well then, why didn't you tell me all this sooner?" asked Jo bashfully. "Now I shall have to show thee all my heart, and I so gladly will, because thou must take care of it hereafter. See then, my Jo." Ah, the dear funny little name. "I had a wish to tell something the day I said goodbye in New York, but I thought the handsome friend was betrothed to thee, and so I spoke not." He thought she was engaged to Laurie. "Would thou have said yes then if I had spoken?" "I don't know. I'm afraid not, for I didn't have any heart just then." "Prut! That I do not believe. It was asleep till the fairy prince came through the wood and waked it up." "Ah, well, thy erst lieb is thy best, but that I should not expect. Yes, the first love is the best, so be contented, for I never had another. Teddy was only a boy and soon got over his little fancy," said Jo, anxious to correct the professor's mistake. "Good. Then I shall rest happy and be sure that thou givest me all. I have waited so long, I am grown selfish, as thou wilt find, Professorian." "I like that," cried Jo, delighted with the new name. "Now tell me what brought you at last, just when I most wanted you." "This. and Mr. Bear took a little worn paper out of his waistcoat pocket. Jo unfolded it and looked up much abashed, for it was one of her own contributions to a paper that paid for poetry, which accounted for her sending it an occasional attempt. "How could that bring you?" she asked, wondering what he meant. "I found it by chance. I knew it by the names and the initials, and in there was one little verse that seemed to call me. Read and find him. I will see that you go not in the wet." Jo obeyed and hastily skimmed through the lines, which she christened "In the Garret." 4 little chests all in a row, dim with dust and worn by time, all fastened and filled long ago by children now in their prime. 4 little keys hung side by side with faded ribbons brave and gay, when fastened there with childish pride long ago on a rainy day. 4 little names, one on each lid, carved out by a boyish hand, and underneath there lieth hid histories of the happy band. Once playing here and pausing oft to hear the sweet refrain that came and went on the roof aloft in the falling summer rain. Meg on the first lid, smooth and fair, I look in with loving eyes, for folded here with well-known care a goodly gathering lies. The record of a peaceful life, gifts to gentle child and girl, a bridal gown, lines to a wife, a tiny shoe, a baby curl. No toys in this first chest remain, for all are carried away in their old age to join again in another small Meg's play. Ah, happy mother, well I know you hear like a sweet refrain lullabies ever soft and low in the falling summer rain. Jo on the next lid, scratched and worn, and within a motley store of headless dolls, of school books torn, birds and beasts that speak no more, spoils brought home from the fairy ground, only trod by youthful feet, dreams of a future never found, memories of a past still sweet. Half-writ poems, stories wild, April letters warm and cold, diaries of a willful child, hints of a womanly early old, hints of a woman early old, a woman in a lonely home, hearing like a sad refrain, be worthy, love, and love will come in the falling summer rain. That's the line. My Beth, the dust is always swept from the lid that bears your name, as if by loving eyes that wept. By careful hands that often came, death canonized for us one saint, ever less human than divine, and still we lay with tender plaint, relics in this household shrine. The silver bell so seldom rung, the little cap which she last wore, the fair dead Catherine that hung by angels born above her door, the song she sang without lament in her prison house of pain, forever are they sweetly blent with the falling summer rain. Upon the last lid's polished field, legend both fair and true, a gallant knight bears on his shield Amy in letters gold and blue. Within lie snoods that bound her hair, slippers that have danced their last, faded flowers laid by with care, fans whose airy toils are past, gay valentines, all ardent flames, trifles that have borne their part in girlish hopes and fears and shames, the record of a maiden heart. Now learning fairer, truer spells, hearing like a blithe refrain, the silver sound of bridal bells in the falling summer rain. 4 little chests all in a row, dim with dust and worn by time. 4 women taught by weal and woe to love and labor in their prime. 4 sisters parted for an hour, none lost, one only gone before, made by love's immortal power. Nearest and dearest evermore, O when these hidden stores of ours lie upon the Father's sight, may they be rich in golden hours, deeds that show fairer for the light. Lives whose brave music long shall ring, like a spirit-stirring strain, souls that shall gladly soar and sing in the long sunshine after the rain. It's very bad poetry, but I felt it when I wrote it. One day when I was very lonely and had a good cry on a rag bag. I never thought it would go where it could tell tales, said Joe, tearing up the verses the professor had treasured so long. Let it go. It has done its duty, and I shall have a fresh one when I read all the brown book in which she keeps her little secrets, said Mr. Bear with a smile, as he watched the fragments fly away on the wind. Yes, he added earnestly, I read that, and I think to myself, she has a sorrow, she is lonely. She would find comfort in true love. I have a heart full for her. Shall I not go and say, if this is not too poor a thing to give, for what shall I hope to receive? Take it in God's name. And if you came to find that it was not too poor, but the one precious thing I needed, whispered Joe. Oh, and so you came to find that it was not too poor, but the one precious thing I needed, whispered Joe. I had no courage to think that at first. Heavenly kind was your welcome to me, but soon I began to hope. And then I said, I will have her if I die for it, and so I will, cried Mr. Bear with a defiant nod, as if the walls of mist closing around them were barriers which he was to surmount or valiantly knock down. Joe thought that was splendid, and offered to be worthy of her knight, though he did not come prancing on a charger in gorgeous array. What made you stay away so long? She asked presently, finding it so pleasant to ask confidential questions and get delightful answers that she could not keep silent. It was not easy, but I could not find the heart to take you from that so happy a home until I could have a prospect of one to give you. After much time, perhaps, and hard work, how could I ask to give you so much from a poor fellow who has no fortune but a little learning? I'm glad you are poor. I couldn't bear a rich husband, said Joe decidedly, adding in a softer tone, don't fear poverty. I've known it long enough to lose my dread and be happy working for those I love. Don't call yourself old. 40 is the prime of life. I couldn't help loving you if you were 70. The professor found that so touching that he would have been glad of his handkerchief if he could have got at it. As he couldn't, Joe wiped his eyes for him and said, laughing as she took away a bundle or two, I may be strong-minded, but no one can say I'm out of my sphere now, for women's special mission is supposed to be drying tears and bearing burdens. I'm to carry my share, Friedrich, and help to earn the home. Make up your mind to that, or I'll never go, she added resolutely as he tried to reclaim his load. We shall see. Have you patience to wait a long time, Joe? I must go away and do my work alone. I must help my boys first, because even for you I may not break my word to Mina. I cannot. Can you forgive that and be happy while we hope and wait? Yes, I know I can, for we love one another, and that makes all the rest easy to bear. I have my duty also, and my work. I couldn't enjoy myself if I neglected them, even for you, so there's no need of hurry or impatience. You can do your part out west, I can do mine here, and both be happy hoping for the best and leaving the future to be as God wills. Ah, thou giftest me such hope and courage, and I have nothing to give back but a full heart in these empty hands, cried the professor, quite overcome. Joe never would learn to be proper, for when he said, as they stood upon the steps, Gracie's got to pee, I think, Daddy. She just put both hands into his, whispering tenderly, not empty now. And stooping down, kissed her Friedrich under the umbrella. It was dreadful, but she would have done it if the flock of draggle-tailed sparrows on the hedge had been human beings. She was very far gone indeed, and quite regardless of everything but her own happiness. Though it came in such a very simple guise, that was the crowning moment of both their lives, when turning from the night and storm and loneliness to the household light and warmth and peace waiting to receive them with a glad welcome home, Jo let her lover in and shut the door. Yes, there's one chapter left, but I can't do it, guys. I can't do it tonight. This is Mrs. Wolfe from Reading with Beverly Wolfe saying, thanks for joining me tonight. And who knows when we'll read the last chapter. Might be this weekend. You never know. Take care. God bless you guys. I love you. Never forget that, eh? And thanks for just hanging with me.